My name's L.B. Lakes, and the word that's close to my heart and on my mind is land. Open land, natural and beautiful land. Land that stretches before our eyes as it stretches our imagination. There's a lot of it in this great country of ours, but not a lot left where you and I can make a real difference. And as a hero of mine, Will Rogers, once said about land, they aren't making any more of it. Yes, they aren't making any more land, but we can make something that's just as important. We can make a difference through a special incentive to land ownership called conservation easements. Now, I'm no expert, but you're about to hear from some folks who are. They love this land of ours like you and I do. And you'll hear how the land you buy can be all you want it to be for your enjoyment now, and remain that way for countless generations to come. Conservation easements can add financial benefits to ownership now and protect the land for the future. If you're like me, it's not just about leaving your mark. It's about leaving a message. With conservation easements, it's not just land, it's a legacy. And it's not just a purchase, it's a promise.
I was introduced into the concept of conservation easements by Edmund Cash in the early part of 2002. My wife and I were looking for a piece of property as an escape to get away and relax. And Edmund at that time had put together Mountain Cove Farms, which was in total 11,000 acres, and he had actually subdivided it into mini farms. And we fell in love with a 40-acre tract over there and eventually purchased it. After that, Edmund had informed me that there was an option that we might be able to preserve the property in perpetuity with a conservation easement. And so we investigated that, and he put me in touch with several professionals or individuals who could help me understand the concept, number one, with an appraiser, an accountant, and an attorney who made the process much, much easier for us to understand and get our hands around. And the second benefit, not only having the property, was that we did in fact get a tax benefit or tax savings, which made the deal that much more sweet for us and really sealed the deal.
I think that the one significant benefit of the conservation easement, of course, is that you preserve that property in its natural state, albeit in my case, I did reserve the right to develop 3 home sites on the 115 acres. But other than that, the property will remain in its natural state, not only for my life, but for the next generations in my family. And it's my expectation that I'll pass this property on to those generations, and they will enjoy it just as I will.
I think what the landowner needs to look at is who are the team players in successfully getting him a conservation easement appraisal. And the appraiser has to be able to work with a trust. He has to be able to work with a CPA. He has to be work with an attorney. And whoever the landowner chooses that is his team, then there should be a great amount of teamwork, and each party should respect what their individual duties are, but they need to help each other out in that case. So the concept that exists here today is that you have a networking of people. You have the team players in here, but yet we're able to network and talk and relate to things, and we really complement each other. We're not competitors. We're trying to assist the landowner in having a successful conservation easement appraisal.
Well, the first thing you need to do is work with a land trust to find someone that will take your conservation easement contribution.
Well, the North American Land Trust is a not-for-profit, publicly supported organization with the general purpose of preserving and managing open space lands that support ecological, agricultural, or historical significance. NALT was established in 1992 and granted permanent public status by the IRS in 1997. Since that time, NALT has grown and currently is registered to do business in 15 states. Again, also since that time, NALT has completed over 250 conservation easement projects and protected over 47,000 acres of land. NALT's become very well known for its innovation and landowner rights and economic interests. all of the immediate NALT staff play an incredibly important role in setting up the conservation easement. We all have a specific job to do, and I think we do it very, very well. Outside of the immediate NALT staff, of course, there are attorneys on both sides and both parties, landowners, and of course that represent the trust, and the landowners themselves, and very importantly, the appraisers who put valuation on that land that at the end of the day is going to dictate that number that represents that charitable deduction or the economic benefit.
Then your second step obviously would be to work with an appraisal firm and get your appraisal made.
The appraiser's role is valuable from the standpoint of ascertaining a value for the charitable contribution that would be derived. Also, the appraiser's role is to qualify that this property can be a conservation easement appraisal, and that's important too. But everyone is going to look to the appraiser for ascertaining value. They're going to look to the appraiser to determine the highest and best use of the property, and also they're going to look at the appraiser to establish the physical attributes that lead to the highest and best use of that property.
Once you have those two things, then the third thing that you would want to do is record that conservation easement with the county where the property is located. Once you do those three things, you've got your easement recorded and completed, and you're ready to take the tax advantages of that easement.
To qualify for a conservation easement, we first want to physically inspect the property. We want to go see the property, and we want to find out if it does qualify under some of those criteria that were just mentioned. Also, we want to note the physical attributes of the property. We're looking for things that are unique in the property. All properties are different. No two properties are alike. So we want to find those physical attributes that would blend in well with the conservation purpose, which is the intent of the conservation easement in the first place. There's two techniques typically. We're going to look at just raw land. We're going to look at comparable sales on raw land, and we're going to take that and apply it to the subject as it compares with other properties, and that's one technique. Another technique we use is called a subdivision analysis, in which we're going to find out how it's owned, how many units can be put there, have a down and dirty layout for a typical subdivision layout, and then we're going to use that methodology. Then once we've established that, we're going to establish a before value. The before value is something that is the retail value of the property, less any developments that you put in it, and then we have the before value. The next thing we're going to ascertain is what is the after value. We're going to find properties that sold, and what did they sell for? Were they sold with a conservation easement on them at that time? If so, then we want to consider the after value. We're simply going to subtract the after value from the before value, and that is our charitable contribution value.
What you're giving up, in my view, in terms of the development rights, is not that significant by comparison to the benefits that you derive from imposing a conservation easement.
Well, there's really three benefits to a conservation easement. The first obviously being that you've got a charitable deduction that you can take. The second benefit is that for your property taxes, normally you get a lower assessed value on the land once the easement's recorded, so that saves your property taxes. And then the third advantage is estate planning type items. The land that's under a conservation easement has a lower value for estate purposes, so if you're looking to pass that land on to future generations, there's definitely an estate tax advantage there.
The overriding benefit is the simple fact that your land will be protected in perpetuity, and it will remain your land. It can still remain a private entity, does not have to be public, and there's a charitable tax deduction, an economic benefit to donating a conservation easement.
The criteria for a conservation easement appraisal, the general heading is that it's under the term of conservation. It's a conservation project. And being a conservation project, actually the things that stick out most are that it should be an open and scenic tract of land. It should be for recreation and even for education for the public for recreation. It should be a natural habitat for endangered species and other animals and vegetation. And also, most important is it may be a historic property. and it should be preserved as a historic property. Those are the general things that qualify for a conservation easement.
The IRS and Congress has put several things in the code, in the laws, to encourage landowners to do conservation easements. It's something that Congress thinks is worthwhile, and so there are tax incentives and tax benefits for doing so.
The taxing authority has to, in the state of Georgia, for the Georgia Conservation Tax Credit, has to approve the after valuation, the low valuation of the property after the imposition of the conservation easement. And by approving that after valuation, they then acknowledge that that's the value of the property, and therefore they can't tax you at a higher value. The value of the property after the imposition of the conservation easement was actually less than the purchase price. So for tax purposes, property tax purposes, the property is being taxed at a lower value.
When you first look at this and people come to you and say, well, you can place this property into a land trust or make a charitable contribution to a land trust, they will protect this piece of property, how big or small, and it will be here forever. So if after I'm through enjoying it, generations after me can still enjoy it. And the benefit is, not only is there the true charitable gift, which I think in and of itself is altruistic and makes us all feel good, but there is an economic benefit as well, in that you can have a substantial, in some cases, tax savings. So ultimately reducing your initial cost for the piece of property.
Land that's owned for less than a year, you're going to be limited to the price that you paid for the land less the value of the land with the easement recorded. So that difference is your charitable deduction. That deduction is limited to 50% of your adjusted gross income. So let me give you an example of that. If, let's say you've got an adjusted gross income of $100,000, then your charitable deductions are limited to $50,000 for that first year. Now the important thing is that with a conservation easement, you also can carry any unused deduction over for 15 years. So that once you use it in the first year, you have 15 years to use up the remainder of that deduction. Now for land that's held for more than a year, there's a different set of rules that apply. Normally you're going to use the highest and best valuation to come up with your deduction. And that is the highest and best use of the land, less, again, the value of the land with the easement on there is your deduction. And typically that's going to be a little higher number. Again, it's limited to 50% of your adjusted gross income, but as in the first example, you get to carry that over for 15 years. So you have plenty of time to fully utilize that deduction.
It saves on estate taxes, because what used to happen when the patriarch and the matriarch owned the land, and then they passed on, the children had to sell the land to satisfy the taxes, the estate taxes. The estate taxes kick in at 55%. So when there's a big demand, when someone dies and the death tax or inheritance tax is there, it kicks in at 55%. So if you have it under a conservation easement, all that's been handled, and there's a smooth transition that the property would stay with the family. Another great benefit is the fact that you're not only preserving the land, now you're allowed to take a charitable contribution, which is a gift. It's in the category of a gift. It qualifies just like you give a gift to a church or to a public body in that case. And that charitable contribution sometimes helps those people who need a tax deduction through the years. It also saves you on your property taxes. The tax assessor is going to look at that property and say, well, they gave up the development rights, then what is this property worth in the after stage? So usually there's probably as much as a 50% reduction in property taxes.
The initial process, of course, a landowner would contact the trust, and then we would set up what we call an initial site visit, where you have a face-to-face meeting with the land trust and the landowner, which establishes an initial relationship and an understanding on both parties of what the landowner wants, importantly, and what the trust would expect from the landowner. Out of that initial site visit, a report is generated. In this report, you document the conservation purposes. There are 4 basic conservation purposes used to establish and justify a conservation easement. The second step in that would be to send out a biologist or a trained NALT staff member who can verify those conservation purposes and then further strengthen those purposes by walking the land, understanding the land, and building kind of from the top down what is significant about this conservation area. Of course, at that point, the meetings would progress and the landowner, we, the trust, begin to understand much more in depth what the landowner wants from their land, and we establish a series of reserved rights. And these reserved rights basically allow the landowner to achieve what they want to do with their land, to work on their land in the context of the conservation purposes that are documented. At that point, the documentation and the papers would go to the attorneys represented by the landowner and the trust, and they would finalize that document and it would be recorded in the courts in perpetuity.
I found North American Land Trust be very easy to work with. We negotiated the conservation easement a good bit. They gave on some points, they didn't give on other points, but they were fair. The appraisal process went very smoothly.
The initial contact with the landowner to the appraiser is that the appraiser should come out and physically inspect the property. The landowner is not looking for a value at that time. He's not looking at what charitable contribution value you may assign to my property. But he wants to know if you're capable of doing it, how many appraisals you've done. Most of the time it's by word of mouth. Someone else has recommended that he did one for me, he did a good job, I think he'll do a good job for you. So the landowner should feel comfortable with the appraiser, because ultimately the landowner is the one that's going to be faced with defending that value.
And it all went very smoothly, and I was very pleased with the values that the appraiser came up with. So all in all, it was a very simple process. The total cost of that process, considering the North American Land Trust cost, the appraisal cost, the title work that had to be done, the survey work that had to be done, was all relatively inexpensive compared to the tax savings. The tax savings actually covered both the cost of the land and the cost of imposing the conservation easement.
The personal reason would be to protect your investment, your legacy, and your heritage. And in doing so, in donating a conservation easement, you can protect that land and know and have a peace of mind that yourself, your children, your children's children, and future generations will have that land the way you purchased that land.
First of all, I think it depends on the individual you're dealing with, the developer or the landowner who you're purchasing the property from. And in this case, Edmund was very forthright, truthful, honest, trustworthy. I had a relationship with him personally prior to the purchase of the property. And Edmund, through his many relationships, business and otherwise, put me in touch with the right people. As I mentioned earlier, the appraiser, the attorney, the land trust company, who basically walked me through step by step this process, and knowing that this was a truly legitimate, bona fide concept and practice, that it had passed multiple tests of scrutiny, both legal and otherwise, and it made sense. My accountant said, this is a very good deal for you. It's going to enable you to own this property at a much lower cost than you would have to otherwise. And then you own this property and you can pass it on, and it's going to stay like this forever. So that made it very easy. And then as other opportunities presented themselves, and I was in cahoots, so to speak, with other people of like mind, we were able to purchase bigger tracts of land, and those individuals had also had and learned from my experience and had their own experiences with conservation easements. It just made it that much easier.
NALT takes a great deal of time and goes the extra step to establish sound stewardship objectives and a long-term, long-standing relationship with the landowner. And this is very, very important to us. We want to understand the needs and wants of the landowner in relationship to the conservation area that they have donated, and work with them in that context so that they can use their land as they had hoped to use it, as maybe past generations had used it, and how they want future generations to use it. Once we have established the relationship with the landowner, understood the reserved rights, what they want to do with the land. That becomes documented, and the attorneys take that over from there before it is registered with the courts.
But I've been a real estate lawyer for 30 years, and I was unaware of the existence of conservation easements and the tax benefits of conservation easements until Kathy and I decided to buy this property on Lookout Mountain. And my sense is that there are a lot of other folks out there who are unaware of the existence of the charitable contribution tax deduction that is afforded by way of these conservation easements. And additionally, it's a good way to afford a piece of property that you might otherwise not be able to afford.
The umbrella reason for why would you donate a piece of property? For the preservation of the environment. Yes, there's the personal level value of your land is protected, but again, it reaches and transcends well beyond yourself, your family, and even your neighbors. Green space, open space, wooded areas is how we breathe. It cleans our air. It's obviously so very important and of utmost importance.
There should be no doubt in your mind when you put a conservation easement on a piece of property that it's truly what you want to do, because it is forever. It is long-lasting, but when you do it, you can rest assured that it has been scrutinized, and it's done to the letter of the law, and it's passed every litmus test there is, and you can sleep better at night knowing that not only have you got a financial benefit from it, which is secondary, but a piece of property that you can pass on for years and years to come.
My whole life, I've always wanted to be a biologist. That is from when I was a very small child and running around the woods. I always felt something, a sense of conviction that I wanted to protect the environment. And through school, getting a degree in biology, and then going to graduate school, I started working in conservation projects. And that kind of segued me in, unbeknownst to myself, into conservation biology and into the not-for-profit sector. And it's incredibly rewarding. You have an opportunity to make a difference that you see, not only me on a personal level, but people all around you. And the look on a landowner's face when they have that peace of mind that, okay, this is protected, this is not going to change, that's incredible. And then I walk away at the end of the day, and the selfish part of me feels really good going, hey, you just did something pretty darn good. You should feel good about this. It's one more piece of green space or wooded area, forest land that will be there long after I'm gone. And that's very satisfying. And that drives me to continue to do this. And I think I can speak for all of the staff at NALT. We're all convicted in what we do. And I think that's why we do it so very well.
This is LB Lakes again. If you'd like to learn more about all the benefits of conservation easements, I hope you'll contact the good folks at Long Branch Lakes in Spencer, Tennessee by calling 866-615-6616.